Okay, I've got a couple more things. Sorry, my husband walked in and I'm still on vacation. Hey. Um, so a couple of other pitfalls to be careful of with grammar are dangling participles. Say that 5 times fast. Participles are the words ending in ing, walking, running, things along that line. You don't want to end the sentence there because it's considered a not full sentence. It could go have a much richer experience. Now, also take into context that a lot of these rules are rules, okay? And once you know the rules, a lot of writers break them. So I don't want to say they're guidelines because they're not guidelines, but you have to practice your craft in order to get really good at the power of it. Now, the other thing that I wanted to also kind of give some writing tips around is like how to structure your paragraphs. Like, obviously the lead is 1 sentence long, right? And the nut graph is usually 2 to 3 sentences. One of the things that oftentimes really good writers is also varying sentence length. So you might have a really long sentence that is describing something, right? So you have a really strong noun, verb, object, and you might describe, comma, the object, right? And then you'll have that be a longer sentence. And then you might have a shorter sentence. And then you might have a very short sentence. Now, what that very short sentence does is it kind of trips up the reader a little bit. And it's kind of like you're adding a vibe, a pacing to your writing. And what that looks like is say for example, like you're writing about, I was just in Jamaica today, so we'll talk about Jamaica. Everyone loves, Jamaican food. Let's talk about Jamaican food because it was freaking amazing. I'm not gonna lie. George ate the best jerk chicken, and it came with potatoes, carrots, and onions or something along that line, right? So you're describing what came on the meal. And then you might have a little bit more detail around how that meal was presented. And then you might have a person kind of responding to that saying, oh, it was really great. And that kind of gives a vibe to your writing. Pay attention to that. And the reason being is that when you start paying attention to sentence length, you're not going to sound sing-songy. And one of the things that oftentimes also happens is we aren't always comfortable with how we use third person language, right? So we might start sentences with the same noun over and over and over again, and it just doesn't sound right, right? Pay attention to things along that line, right? Be kind to your readers. Don't give them mundane sentences that are always using the same noun subject, right? So what that might look like, an example, is you're talking about a fire, right? And you're talking about how the firefighters responded to the fire. You don't want to use the firefighters over and over and over again as you're talking through the story. So you might respond, really focus on the firefighters at first, and then you're gonna maybe the next sentence might be fire personnel, or you might say that they completed, they put out the fire. So those are some examples of like sentence structure. Now, another thing about grammar is you want to also make sure that you're really focusing on the most important aspect of the interview, right? So you've got all of this kind of data, right? And you've got to make sense of it. What is the most important piece of what you learned? And when you're structuring your sentences, you might have the focus being on the what, or the how, or the where as your noun, right? And you might kind of filter through how that impacts the reader, right? Because you're always translating for the reader. What does this mean to you? Why is it important? How does this make sense in the world? And so you're going to want to really focus on being mindful of which part of the story are you telling, right? So which part of the story are you telling is really important, because where you start logically is going to impact how the story flows. So those are some things that I really wanted to share with you. There's a lot more. I'm actually going to probably post a couple more videos over the next day or two. I also want to kind of pull out here a little zoom out with regards to just writing in general. You know, I know you're working on your interviews for the audio and the photos, right? I want to just underscore the importance of what the work you're doing, because storytelling is a very powerful way to communicate. And you never really realize this until you're in your job, right? And it might be working in an advertising agency or a communication strategy firm. Actually, one of the people that I had dinner with last night, I'm with a group of 28 people. One of our friends is the VP or the director of a communication strategy company. And I was talking to her a little bit about, how she's hiring people, right? And she said, I'm always looking for problem solvers, because we always have to think about how you're attaching, the meaning of what you're writing as a problem solving kind of process. And I really wanted to kind of talk to you a little bit about that piece of it, because problem solving and creative thinking around how you do what you do, whether you're a journalism major, whether you're a communications major, or a art, all of this is problem solving for your reader, for your intended audience. And when you understand that and own that, let me give you an example, because I think this is one of the things that really came to mind. So I'm the second shift crime reporter at the Kenosha News. This was years ago, and I'm going to it was a car crash, and it was involving a pedestrian versus a car, or car versus pedestrian. The guy was hurt really badly, right? So I go to the scene and I'm looking at how the police are responding and what the scene looks like, how many cars are involved, who's where, are there ambulances, how many are there? I'm really observant about what's in front of me so I can describe this to my readers. So I go up to the police officer and I introduced myself, because I don't know everybody yet, because I had only been on this job for probably about 7-8 months. And I said, hey, I just want to understand a little bit about what happened, and what can you tell me about what transpired tonight? And he gave me some details, and I said, is there anything else you wanted to add? Big, awesome question to ask. Is there anything else that you think I need to know that I didn't ask? Big bonus if you guys use this, okay? And he says, yeah, there is one thing. He said, we don't know this guy's name, and we're trying to figure out who he is. So one of the ways that you can help us is if you can add this detail, because this guy was just walking across the street and he said he had a can of peanuts. And I said, peanuts? And he said, yeah. He said he just was carrying a can of peanuts, and that's all we know about him. He didn't have a driver's license. He didn't have any other identification, all of this stuff, right? So I added that detail to the story. And this guy is hurt really bad. He actually ended up on life support, right? So a couple of days go by, and I get this phone call from this woman, and she said, I read your story, and I want to ask you about the peanuts. And she said, like, I had seen a friend of mine, and he lived in the same apartment building, and he was going to get cigarettes or something like that, right? And I asked him if he could get me some peanuts, and he hasn't come home, and I don't know. He's a person that lives in my building. I didn't know him well. And basically, we kind of put two and two together. And I said, you might want to talk to the police because they're trying to figure out who this guy is. And she said, yeah. She said, I don't know him, but I know his name. And I said, well, you might want to talk to the police, right? So a few days more go by, and the police officer calls me, and he says, hey, so because of the story that you wrote, I wanted just to kind of tell you what the end of the story was. And he said that this man ended up passing away, and he was able, however, because of the story I wrote and those stupid peanuts, he was able to find out who this man was, and he was able to track him down, and he was able to notify his family that he was actively dying. And they were able to say goodbye to him. So the moral of that story is that the details matter. How observant you are has a really big bearing on what the value of that story becomes to somebody. And I wanted to tell you that story because this is something that's always stuck with me as a writer. And it's really important because even if you're a communications person or an art person or a video person, whatever kind of communication, the details matter, right? But you also have to go through this process of figuring out which details are important, because not everything is important. So like, you don't throw the kitchen sink at everybody, right? You have to have balance and honor the weight of the story. So I hope this helps, because, and we'll talk a lot more about this as we kind of go on, but I wanted to share some of those things. I'm sorry I'm kind of rambling tonight, but I wanted to kind of get some of this off my mind and get you guys some information. Make sure that you are doing the Module 6 readings for grammar. If you have any questions with regards to the assignment, I did leave a very lengthy, very detailed announcement, which also included the link to the video from class. If you were not in class, shame on you, first of all. Okay, we'll just forget that. Shame on you. But if you were not in class, make sure that you watch the video from last week, because it's really important. I walked you through how to pitch a story, how to make sure that you've got all of the things what you're going to need, the cookbook of what you're doing for the next couple of weeks. Also, just a reminder that the audio visual pieces that you're doing have the capability to morph into your community story. So you can choose to take one of your sources, make it a highlight of an audio visual for your 1 in 8 million story, and then morph it into your community story, which would be an expanded written version of that. So I'm trying to kind of like make sure that you know what all of the things. So let me know if you have any questions. I will talk to you guys later. I'm also going to do another video on Thursday. Talk to you guys later. Bye.